Okay, so here is the program.
Okay, so we struggled with this when we were designing it as far as a program because originally what it was, we were looking at it almost like we were shadow regulators. And we were going in there and saying, okay, what's your org chart and, what sort of committees you have and that sort of thing. And, understanding that framework is important. So it wasn't like we totally got rid of it. But we were much more concerned with how much can we rely on this program to be mitigating the risk. We could never 100% abdicate that, and which is why we did the activity reviews and other things. But we also wanted to know, do we have to do deeper dives with particular institutions than we would because maybe their program is maturing. Um, so we moved towards a combination of an operational process, which would pick up things like what sort of lists do you have? How many people do you have in your compliance department?
Mhm.
That sort of thing. What sort of AML alerting system you have? Uh, and then also, kind of the success stories and what they're saying about how they deal with things. And the metaphor I would be using is, you know, on the operational stuff, uh, you needed to understand that, for the framework. Not doing it would be like having a car without a steering wheel.
Right.
But you also needed to understand, the program because, that was, kind of the engine that drove the customer base. Who do you bank? Who don't you bank? And how do you tell the difference? So for me, you needed both. But the last thing we wanted was to be a shadow regulator. Like for me, everything got down to a single question, and I would spend a lot of time on this when I was looking at the memos, which is, how much can I actually rely on their program? And we actually had a formal determination where I I can think that I'm getting substantial mitigation, I'm getting maturing mitigation, or I'm getting limited mitigation from their program, and that affected the scoring. And there was times in it that we would adjust, the amount of mitigation we got either from the AML program or also we had a similar one with the regulatory regime. And if we change those, maybe from substantial mitigation down to limited mitigation, that would change the risk ranking. Maybe you bring them from, kind of middle of the road to, high risk, which we'd still bank them. But that meant that all of our procedures, all of our alerting stuff or whatever was much more sensitive. So you were just spending more work on those particular customers. And, that was really important.
Sure. I just have a question for you, Tom, just to get your feedback on this, is that, for the correspondent banks, how important is it to have, people on the ground? Because I feel that, we see a lot of, correspondent banks operating in different countries. In terms of expense, of course, you cannot afford to have offices in every country. But I hardly see risk people actually traveling. I mean, you have traveled extensively. I'm not sure that that is commonly observed. So how would you value local people in the market? That's one, and then also risk people joining the business people in the market visits.
Okay, so good questions. As far as like having local people in the market, when I was doing it, we had local people in the market. So for me, that was the base case. Um, there really wasn't an instance other than maybe if you had like, I don't know, a branch that was one off in a particular country or something like that, where we didn't have people in the market. And for me, it was very natural, to because we were traveling together and together for, oftentimes several days,
Yeah,
for me to be understanding their perspective. And, they knew the banks really well. So obviously, they were briefing me on that. So, uh, partly I'd have to dodge your question because I never had an instance, uh, certainly when we were working together, where we didn't have the local people there.
that's
I
true.
know that subsequently that changed, but I had moved on from that time
Sure.
period.
But
As far as risk people traveling,
mhm,
that's a really interesting issue. I would say that I was more the exception to the rule. Uh, there was a couple of reasons for that. One was our business leadership. Actually, it wasn't the risk people, it was the business leadership very much wanted their compliance and risk people to understand the risk and understand the customer. So, they very much encouraged us to travel and certainly funded it. But ironically, I remember, being in a discussion with very, very senior people at the bank, and our head of international was bragging to the head of global enterprise risk, my risk person, travels more than I do. And at one point, I was the number one traveler for all of the bank, even more than the head of international, and he took that as a badge of pride. Uh, so I had more opportunities to travel than I physically could do that. Now I had a team that also traveled, so that helped. Um, with respect to uh, my own perspective, uh, I I really needed to understand what the bank was doing, and we were design building our program. So it really helped me when I was dealing with the customer base to have the conversations with the customer. And so I found it absolutely invaluable. And once you get to a point where you're meeting people year after year after year, they truly were relationships. So uh,
right.
eventually it becomes very tiring.
Yeah,
Towards the end, I was exhausted, but uh, so I would have to say for the time that I was in correspondent banking, um, that was just kind of what we did.
yeah,
Eventually I did get, you know, I just got overwhelmed and moved from correspondent banking over into the commercial and corporate banking area, just because I was wearing out. But
right.
that's just normal
Mhm,
career, career adjustments.
sure. Thank you. So, on this slide, was there anything else that you wanted to mention or
No,
anything?
no,
Okay,
I would say, in the program, you have to have the program tied to the customer base and how I mean, think of it this way. The three questions are who do you bank, who don't you bank, and how do
right.
you tell the difference? The program goes to the third portion. How do you tell the difference?
Exactly. Hmm. Absolutely.